WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're a couple of crab cakes into this thing. I'm wearing my Costas in gear here, and I've greased up my friends at Wise Market to say we're heading west in August, and you better have some Maryland crab meat for me. But if there is a crab bowl trophy amongst the baseball teams here in the greater Chesapeake area, the bowl sits in the district. Luke Jones joins us now. Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Facebook, and Luke at WNST.net. Luke, man, I got a new desk. Thanks to our friends at MOI. I'm going to be shouting them out because I've never been more comfortable leaning in, and I can make my desk go up and down. So I have all of this, and we're going to do Maryland, and Maryland crabs. And I don't know that these people in D.C. really want to be annexed into our state or not, but it's weekends like this that if I still had the passion that I once had, I'd be pretty angry today about a 3-game sweep at the hands of the Washington, as my dad would say, the Senators.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's funny, a week ago, we were talking about this club and looking at the first quarter of the season, half the games that they had played against the Red Sox and the Yankees, going 4-6 against both of those teams. And we were saying, what? Okay, this team isn't good, but maybe it's not quite as bad as we had thought. And you're looking for those individual success stories, starting with John Means and Cedric Mullins and Trey Mancini coming back and looking like pre-cancer Trey Mancini at the plate. And, things weren't so bad. And then you have an 0-6 week, and you look at where they've been really going back to the John Means no-hitter, which was about 3 weeks ago at this point in time. They were 15-16 when he throws the no-hitter on May 5th. And then you lose 13 of your next 15 games. And look, no one was saying that the no-hitter was signifying some kind of great leap into prosperity for what is still a rebuilding club, but it was fun. It was a situation.
2-13 since the no-hitter.
Yeah.
2-13.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's like I'm raking in Major League, and I'm like,
sure.
They're 2-13? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I realized they hadn't won a lot, and I realized they hadn't won this week.
Yeah.
Man, that's tough math. That's the
really
kind
rough
of math that, puts you, 98 losses or whatever that awful number is going to be, because they've sort of fallen down. They can't get up. This is where Holiday, they go on the road, you lose track and you come back and you're 20 games under 500.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're kind of staring at right now although you could say they've played better on the road this weekend series in DC notwithstanding, they've played better on the road than they have at home. I mean, they've just been god awful at Camden Yards. But I mean, for me, it really comes back to, you look at their starting pitching. Matt Harvey started out okay. Bruce Zimmerman started out okay. That's gone away for each of those individuals. Haven't seen nearly enough consistency from Dean Kramer. We saw Zach Lowther make a start a couple weeks back. That didn't go well. So that those young guys, I mean, not Harvey, but those other young guys I just mentioned, haven't taken that step forward yet. And we know that they're not the top tier of pitching prospects in the system, but they're certainly guys that you're hoping you can find an answer or two out of that group. At least to maybe settle in on the back end of the rotation. But it's really been John Means. And when you have that situation in your starting rotation where John Means is great, Zimmerman, I think, has the next best ERA, and that's 5.5, 5.59. Jorge Lopez, we know he looks really good first time through the order, maybe the second time through the order, and then he just completely falls apart after that. What does that signal? Probably a 2 or 3 inning reliever rather than a starter. But the problem is, you need someone to make starts for you and give you some innings. And what we're seeing now, and this really came to fruition over the last week or so, is this is really starting to impact the bullpen. The bullpen, which had been very effective through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, now we're seeing them start to have some struggles. I mean, Cesar Valdez isn't getting save situations. So, I mean, there's even been some discussion where you might see him kind of move back into a middle relief, bridge relief kind of role, because they're just not getting it from, Plutko had been good early on, but he's really struggled his last couple times out. Sean Armstrong's been terrible. He was a guy who pitched well for them last year, and going into the season thought he might be a 7th or 8th inning guy, and he's kind of, it's kind of disintegrated into a mop-up role for him. We know they have a Rule 5 guy at the very back of the bullpen in Tyler Wells, but you're really seeing the bullpen almost look like it's starting to run on fumes. And when you're talking about you're not to Memorial Day yet, and you're talking about that, boy, it's not a good place to be. And then on the flip side,
well, they've already also thrown some guys out, right? Like they Jay Flaw, and like they've had guys that got 3 innings and a couple of appearances, and they've already jettisoned those guys. So they're already going into that, right?
Sure.
And they're already going into the DL Halls and the who are they going to bring guys up in August and September to toss innings and start clocks? I mean, not on anybody legitimate, right?
Well, I mean, anyone who legitimate at A potentially, yeah. I mean, I think we're going to see Zach Lowther again. I think there's a potential to see an Alex Wells later in the season, depending on his health. Same with Mike Baumann. But yeah, DL Hall's at Bowie right now. He started Sunday, pitched well. Good to see. He's on track. Grayson Rodriguez has looked really good at Aberdeen. You're not going to rush those guys right now. I mean,
given the next set of guys innings in August and September who aren't even your best guys, right? They're just guys. They're just quad A, whatever you would say. That's where we are. I mean, we're dealing with a team with, if they're not the 30th best team in baseball, they're 27 or 28, and they're scuffling, the pitching scuffling, just all the things you would be predictive of Felix Hernandez not being a savior, Matt Harvey probably not being a savior. Look, if John Means goes 23-6 with a 1.8 ERA and, pitches 242 innings, if that's the kind of way he profiles, and they don't trade him, I mean, great, I guess. And maybe in the offseason they'd get even more. I don't know. But this is all like fishing for trades or talent or something that we're reaching for that isn't currently in the bullpen. It's currently not at Norfolk. It's currently not at Bowie. Maybe it's at Bowie in 2023 or, if we're looking at it that way. But they got to play games in June and July and August.
Sure.
And they just lost 13 of 15 without anybody noticing. You know what I mean? Like, it can't get any worse than that. That's they better not be stacking 2 and 13s up. But there's no cavalry, and I guess they'll be grabbing guys off the waiver wire. I mean, won't they? That's what they'll be doing, bringing 32-year-old guys in and saying, give them some innings, because sort of what they did last year, right? Well, last year was different because it was 60 games, right?
But 2019, you're right. I mean, they brought in some, whether it was a position player. I mean, last week they designated Rio Ruiz. We can talk about the offense in a moment too, because there's plenty to talk about with that as well. As far as
second base. I mean, I kidded about Jonathan Scope last week, but if he gets released, they'll have him in here batting 218, swinging from the fences, right?
Potentially. I mean, who knows? But I think you just said it, and that's. I mean, I don't think some of those names I mentioned at AAA, I wouldn't even classify them as quad A guys, but they're not I mean, DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez are the Cadillacs of their pitching prospects, right? They're the guys that have the ceiling. Those are the two that you point to who have the potential to be, I guess what John Means looks like he's becoming, but those are the guys all along who were viewed as having that ceiling. And again, Hall at AA, if he continues to pitch well there, will he go to Norfolk later this year? Yeah, that scenario is very plausible. Do I anticipate DL Hall being in Baltimore later this year? No, of course not. Grayson Rodriguez, could he be in Bowie by the summer? Yeah, sure. Is he going to be in Baltimore later this year? No, of course not. But I mentioned, the guys that I mentioned, along with Keegan Aiken, who's been pitching out of the bullpen. You have Lowther, you have Alex Wells, you have Mike Baumann, who has had some health concerns, but he's pitching again, and it's looked pretty good. It seems as though the health is okay with the forearm, but those guys, there's some real prospect potential in that group, but they're not top 20 prospects in all of baseball kind of great. So to your point, yeah, you're going to have some filler in there. And we knew that was going to be the case this year. I mean, you're not predicted to be a 95 to 100 loss team and say that you don't have holes in the roster. That's all you have is holes in the roster. You have a handful of guys right now at the major league level that are players that you say, yeah, they're part of the future, or I think there's a pretty good chance they're part of the future. And what's been disappointing on that front, I mean, you look at someone like Ryan Mountcastle, grand slam on Saturday notwithstanding, he's been off to a really difficult start to the season. And he'll look good for a few games, looks like he's going to bust out of it, and then you're seeing him kind of morph back into the guy that's swinging at too many sliders low and away and just scuffling in that way. You're not giving up on him, but it's been a struggle for him. So when you have so many guys who are placeholders, quad A, never was, never will be again, or a guy like Matt Harvey, who was a star 8 years ago, but has morphed back into what he's looked like the last few years, after looking pretty good in April. Well, you have too many guys on your roster like that, you're going to go through some stretches where you lose 13 of 15, and then you're suddenly neck and neck with the Minnesota Twins for having the worst record in the American League again. So they're clearly not as bad as they've been the last 2 weeks, in the same way that maybe earlier in the year they weren't as good as when they were playing well earlier in the year. But we knew it was going to be a struggle. That's obvious. But to your point, and I totally agree, and that's why I think you do have to wonder if Mike Elias starts looking around and seeing what else is out there. They still need there's a functionality that you need to getting through the season, and you don't want to be in a position where you're compromising your bullpen guys or trying to push your starters harder than you need to, because as much as some of these young guys are scuffling now, I'm not giving up on the idea that Dean Kramer couldn't be their number 5 starter eventually, for example. But you don't want to do things with these guys physically after last year, just how crazy it was. We've talked about it. You're trying to massage the ideas of developing them with also trying to keep them healthy, which is always something you're trying to do with young pitchers anyway, but it's even more important this year. But in the meantime, it's led to a lot of really ugly baseball the last couple of weeks, with the pitching, really going sideways.
Luke Jones is here. We're talking a little baseball in the aftermath. Nobody's watching baseball Sunday. Everybody's watching Phil Mickelson, right? And
or the 76ers.
Well, it was a pretty big weekend for you too, right? So I want to give you a little oxygen. Uncle Luke, your sister made a baby over the weekend, so pretty momentous, right? I mean, a national sweep, Phil Mickelson, Sixers in the playoffs, Capitals not swept out, but it felt like a sweep. But the real story is Uncle Luke has arrived, man. What a week, huh?
Yeah, I just want to wish congratulations to my sister and my brother-in-law, Scarlett Jade Lewis. So congratulations to them, and had a chance to meet her and hold her on Sunday, and it's great.
Is she going to be an Eagles fan? Is that like the way that works?
I think it's probably going to depend on whoever's better at any given time, the Ravens or the Eagles. That's kind of, the nice thing is, it's been a harmonious Baltimore-Philadelphia marriage for those two. And maybe, if it had been 1983, maybe that'd be a different story. But
will Scarlett be a soccer player, do you think, or a lacrosse player, or a field hockey player, or a ballerina? Do we have any thoughts of what Scarlett what kind of athlete she might be on the second day of her life?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I'll say Scarlett's father is a big basketball fan, 76ers fan, as you know, and I've kind of adopted them.
So there will be a little hoop, I had a little Larry Bird hoop for Barry when he was little.
No question. No question about it. In fact, one of the funny things over the weekend was when they were still at the hospital and they were about a day away from coming home, my brother-in-law had messaged me, and my brother ended up handling it, but he actually asked for Scarlett Sixers onesie. Not because she needed the clothes, but because, hey, game 1 of the first round of the playoffs, Wizards and 76ers was Sunday. So he wanted her to have that. So I would say basketball would be the early leader in the clubhouse, but hey, I mean, it's just a matter of wanting her to be healthy and happy and following the things that she loves. But in our sports family, it's going to be surprising if she doesn't turn out a sports fan, whether it's Baltimore or Philadelphia or some combination of both.
Well, Uncle Luke is on the scene, and the Orioles are flying away and half clipped at this point. Some thoughts about baseball in general right now as we move into Memorial Day weekend here. Preakness is over. Hockey's at least over for now. The getting into it and the feeling of pennant races and all of that. Where are you on the sport? I mean, do you come home after an Orioles game and watch Manny Machado play on the West Coast? Because I get the vibe that this San Diego, LA thing, from a baseball perspective, there's a pretty good season out there in that nobody's running away with anything. There's some hope in some places where there hasn't been hope, this being not one of them. But all sorts of things, when I look at the standings, I'm like, well, man, the whole thing's kind of up for grabs. Nobody's really awful and nobody's really good. I don't know that that's compelling, but I think if you fly in, you at least want something that doesn't look like oh, the Yankees are 35-6 again, like it was every year. The Braves are great again. There's not that part of baseball right now. Even the Red Sox, Yankees, the teams that have traditionally done well, kind of stinging. I mean, Pujols is getting paid by one LA team, playing for the other. I mean, the Dodgers and Padres have become this little star show, right? Like, really.
Well, they have, but what's really fun about that is you have those two teams, but you also have the Giants who are hanging around. And the Giants have, as much as we've focused on the Orioles and some of these teams that have done these exhaustive, painful rebuilds. And look, I mean, I've said it to you over and over. The Orioles got deteriorated to a point where they had no choice but to do something like this because they didn't trade Manny Machado 18 months or earlier than they should have, or than they ultimately did. But excuse me,
won't stop him from trading John Means or Trey Mancini.
I think Mancini's the interesting. I mean, John Means, there's still 3 years of club control left, so there's a timetable there that's wide open to kind of see even what next season looks like.
But Mancini's would be even to bring this up and talk about the greater, because the Orioles stunk, and you and I get together once a week, 5 times a week, whatever. Then it becomes about like, all right, it'll be another team with a need for Trey Mancini or that. How does that make the Rubik's Cube work here? Because our best prospect is probably playing low A ball in the White Sox chain right now, right? The guy that's going to change this franchise.
Well, unless Adley Rutschman's that guy right now for the Orioles, but he's at Bowie and he'll be at Norfolk later on this year. I know he had a game-tying 3-run homer on Sunday. I mean, he's looking the part, even if statistically it hasn't, I know his batting average early on wasn't great, but no, going back to the NL West, I think that's been a fantastic story. Remember the Dodgers a couple weeks ago were scuffling a little bit. The Padres have played at a really high level, and now the Dodgers have surged back and they're neck and neck, but everyone expected Padres Dodgers. But then you have the Giants with Mike Yastrzemski and Kevin Gausman shoving and pitching better than he ever did. Gausman was at a couple other places after being traded from the Orioles and didn't do great. So it was kind of looking like, all right, maybe he's not going to become this great guy. And, he's gotten to San Francisco and he's looked like the guy the Orioles drafted in the first round 9 years ago.
Is he? Is he 28? I mean, I'm not being like, is he 28?
He's probably around, I would say he's probably 30. Because he was drafted out of LSU.
And I'm going to find. Yeah. He was right. Yeah. He was a late guy because he really pitched in college.
I mean,
Kevin Gausman was born in 1991. He's 30.
Yeah. I was thinking January he'd be 30 91. Years old.
So, the fact that like some cat figures it out when he's 30, that had a really great arm. That's who Curt Schilling was. I mean, there's all sorts of stories of people that weren't. I mean, Greg Maddux wasn't great when he was 24, 25, So I think that blooming part of Arrieta and these other guys, it doesn't work that way with quarterbacks usually in the NFL, right? Like when you're Tim Couch, you're gone. You don't get that chance, right, to be great. You don't. If you're RG3's not 30, I don't think, is he? I mean, when I think about these guys with their ages and when you're over the hill 5 years into the NFL, if you can't do it with baseball. I mean, Dennis Eckersley figured it out, went to the Hall of Fame, right? And when he got sober and whatnot, so did Schilling. So, I mean, there was a little bit of off the field, on the field, girls, listening to coaches, partying, booze, all of that changes guys. But, man, when you're like top 10 overall and you're like, I saw Strasburg grab the bat this weekend, He looks like an old red beard old man, and I remember he's a 1-1, and everybody was all lathered up about how bad the Nationals could be to get him, right? But Gausman wasn't that far behind, right? And I know we had Ben McDonald on the games, and we talk about what that represents. But, man, when you're taking in the top 5, top 10 overall as a pitcher, as a college pitcher especially, they see – a 15-year career in you if your arm doesn't fall off. And so it's not crazy that Gausman is still around for me. Yeah. I'm shocked that more of those cats don't have a second life in them when they get smarter and sober and eat right and like all of that, get their head on, that they're not chasing that Justin Verlander model of like, I can do this till I'm 38 and make a lot of money if I ever figure it out once, get one contract.
Yeah. I mean, a guy you didn't mention who I thought was good early in his career, but Max Scherzer took his game to a different level. I mean, to a point where he kind of got to his late 20s and early 30s, and it's like, okay, he was a good pitcher before then. He's Hall of Fame worthy now. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame pitcher
Well, it's
now.
like Jamie
And you
Moyer,
look at
right?
that.
Like
So
Jamie Moyer was one of those guys that like bounced around forever, and then you gave him the ball, he had his thing, and you could pencil him in for 250 innings every year, and he wouldn't embarrass you.
no question, no question. And so I think, bringing it back to the NL West, I think that's such a great, compelling story. I mean, Dodgers Giants is the classic rivalry, but the Padres are this young up and coming team, and they've spent money on top of some of the young talent they have. And I remember you and I talking 2 or 3 years ago. I said to you at that point, be watching for the San Diego Padres. Now, at that point in time, I think that was probably when they signed Machado, and everyone's thinking, why is Manny going to San Diego? Well, and the weather's amazing. It's a beautiful ballpark. And oh yeah, look at their farm system. They have some talent that's coming. And we're seeing that come to fruition. But the NL West has been fun. And then I want to give some oxygen to a guy that I've really enjoyed watching the last few years, even with some of his physical challenges. But Shohei Ohtani is amazing. And yeah, we talk about him a lot as baseball fans in general, but we don't talk enough about what this guy really is, how special it is. He pitches. He doesn't just pitch and it's some mop up kind of sideshow or even a case where like he's throwing one inning, they're in a pinch, or some Stevie Wilkerson kind of joke. I mean, this guy's a starting pitcher. He throws 100 miles per hour. I mean, he puts up good numbers. He's a really good pitcher. And then you see him go to right field and he's hitting the ball 440 feet and an exit velo of 110 miles per hour. I mean, we should be.
Sanders couldn't do that.
This
Bo
is
Jackson couldn't.
Forget
do that.
about. I mean, with no disrespect to those two individuals, and those are two guys that, from an athletic standpoint, from my generation as a kid watching them.
Hey, but, by the way, throw Brian Jordan in there too. Put him in.
No question. Of course, local ties there and everything. But what Ohtani is from a physical standpoint, the gifts that he has to pitch and hit. I mean, we're seeing a modern day Babe Ruth, but the difference is Babe Ruth being on the mound in the late 19 teens for the Boston Red Sox. He's not throwing all that terribly hard. It was much more of a pace yourself. And yeah, you're going to throw 350 innings or whatever the number would end up being back then.
Or as my mom would say, that's just the way we did it back then.
Right. Exactly. But this is a guy who's on the mound and throwing 100 miles per hour and striking people out. And he's got just filthy stuff. And then Joe Madden goes to the mound and takes him out, and he goes to right field for the rest of the game. He's batting second. As
no one
pitcher.
Better to play the role of the manager in that movie than Joe Madden, right?
No question. But it really is for those of us who love the history of the game. I mean, Babe Ruth is just, it's mythology as far as the fact that he was this great pitcher in Boston, and then he becomes an outfielder and goes to New York and becomes the greatest player of all time.
When are they coming in here and playing? When are we? You're going to make me go see him now.
I want to say
you're talking me into it. You're selling tickets for these creeps, is what you're doing right now.
I'm thinking right. I'm pretty sure
I'm looking it up. I'm going to look it up. Our regular season schedule. I'm doing it right now.
They go to Anaheim. Is it early July? Yeah, they're in Anaheim early July.
Cheaters come in here end of June. The Astros come in here, and then the Nationals come in here in middle of July. Marlins end of July. Anaheim
late
Angels, August 24, 25, 26. I'm going to be right in the middle of the crab cake tour. We're going to have to figure that out. Man, I want to get Joe Madden on the show is what I want to do. I want to. You know what? If I could talk Madden into a crab cake on the 23rd, I'd do something.
That'd be cool.
That'd be cool. Now we have something. Joe Madden and a crab cake.
But just to finish up Ohtani, this is extraordinary. I mean, this would be something I've seen some people draw the comparison of, Lamar Jackson leading the NFL in touchdown passes, but also being sixth in rushing or whatever he was 2 years ago. It's not even that. I feel like this would be Lamar Jackson leading the league in touchdown passes, but also having 8 interceptions playing safety. I mean, that's how extraordinary this thing that Ohtani is doing right now. And it gets attention, but to me, Shohei Ohtani can't get enough attention right now because it is just extraordinary. The physical ability he has, the work he is putting in to do this, where he is starting. We're not talking about a relief pitcher throwing 2 innings a week. He's starting, and yeah, they manage his innings and workload a little bit here and there. Of course, they're going to, but then he's also an everyday outfielder who rakes. He has power. He's a phenomenal player. He is, from a pure talent standpoint, we already need to be looking at him as one of the most talented. Again, not saying the best player of all time or anything like that, but in terms of raw talent, what he's doing, even in this short few-year period, it's right up there with anything we've seen in the history of the game. And I just feel like we're not appreciating that as much as we need to. In part, he's playing in Anaheim, and yeah, West Coast, 10:05, 10:35 starts, and also the Angels aren't very good, and that's kind of been the problem with Mike Trout not getting the love that he should get as one of the all-time great players that he already is at this point in his career. But the Angels aren't very good, amazingly. And I know Trout's banged up right now, not playing, but you look at the two. These guys are better than just generational talents. These are, really historic kind of talents that they have. And yet the Angels, they're not very good. And it's just kind of amazing to think about that, but also speaks to the beauty of baseball, that you can have the best player on the planet for the last decade in the way that they have with Mike Trout. And you can have one of the most talented players in the history of the game in Shohei Ohtani. And you still have 7 other guys coming to the plate. You still have 4 other pitchers in the
Cal
rotation.
Ripken and couldn't make the playoffs, right?
Exactly.
Ernie Banks. We can go through this forever, right? Like greatness in baseball. And I don't want to get all romantic on you here, but it is about teamwork and strategy, all of those things that Dad taught us. So all the things you'll be teaching young Scarlett when she becomes a soccer player and breaks your heart and doesn't play baseball.
Exactly.
Aren't you looking forward to being Uncle Luke and freezing your ass off on some lacrosse field or some sport that you have no interest in at all?
Of course. I have a couple godsons, and I've seen, been to some games, soccer games, things of that nature, but it hits a little bit different when it's your niece, being an uncle by blood.
She's going to be into hockey, something you have no interest in at all. And
I don't dislike hockey,
but you have to freeze in the rinks to be a good uncle.
I'll throw this out there. All these years later, 3 years in a row now, the Caps haven't gotten out of the first round. Not bringing Barry Trotz back, and you can certainly speak to this way more intelligently than I can. But I thought at the time that was one of the more bizarre situations I've seen. And I think the jury has returned the verdict as far as what that meant for the Washington Capitals. But I don't know nearly as much about this as you do.
Well, let me say this. The 3rd anniversary is coming up in a couple of weeks, and I have not been nearly as honest or as hard on the Leones' family as I probably need to be. So I haven't watched a hockey game because of how I was treated and because of how Barry was treated, and just sort of like with the Orioles and where I'm at 52. I'm not bitching about it. I just don't give the Orioles 50 hours of my week anymore. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with that with the cat. I'm giving 50 hours of my week to learning about fly fishing and crab cakes and the bay and my community and business and Baltimore Positive. And I'm just moving to that doesn't say that I would never watch hockey, or that if I get wealthy, I wouldn't bring a minor league hockey team here, because I would to play at the Royal Farms Arena, because I've always said that, because I love hockey that much. Met my wife at a hockey game. But I'll say this. In a couple of weeks, I was out the other day and I was at State Fair. And 2 weeks ago, and the bartender's waiting on me. It was the first time I was really out, window open. So it was maybe early May. And the waiter was a big Caps fan, and he knew who I was, and we were talking a little bit. And he wanted to see my pictures from the Stanley Cup. And I'm like, I'm on my phone. And my wife had all the really good pictures from the ice at the end of the game. And they're on her account. And they're not tagged where I could find them. And I found pictures that I never saw. Or if I saw them 3:00 in the morning getting on the plane in Vegas. I flew home, never looked at them again. We have pictures that most of the people like you have never seen of that celebration. I have video of Backstrom doing Swedish dances with the cup on a table that that were just on my phone, man. I didn't even put them up because I felt like it might have been a little tacky. I'm going to put them up. I'm going to go find the picture of me eating the salad, the Caesar salad out of the cup. Because I didn't want, literally the cup was sitting at my table, So I felt like I left it really good that night. It was like a movie, the way it all ended. And I went to the parade. I have this incredible picture of Barry Trotz looking this way and everybody in the organization looking this way. And Leonsis is in the picture and all the bosses, the next coaches in the Ovechkin's in the picture. And I thought to myself, you know what? My life in hockey kind of ended that afternoon when I drove back. I did stop and get some great tapas, in downtown Washington. And that was the end. So for me on hockey, so I got to get Trotz on at some point, but I want to share those pictures because it was one of the greatest nights of my life. Like I of all the things I've done, even the Ravens winning and the way they won and all that kind of stuff, the fact that I'm sitting at the table with Barry Trotz, his daughters, his son, and the Stanley Cup sitting there, and we're like, can you pass the pepper? You know?
That's wild. Yeah. I mean, one of the cool things about that, and I'm not a hockey guy. I'm not a Caps fan. Never really, never pretended to be anything like that. But I have lots of people in my life who cared about that, and I mean, that was really fun. I had no dog in that fight. I had no personal satisfaction or enjoyment, but I really was happy for so many people in my life. So many people
who. It was a great run.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, that's awesome.
The way
that's awesome.
that it took my whole life to get there, and that it happened, and it happened with Trotz, and that my wife and I could enjoy it, and that it was great. In Las Vegas.
Oh, of course, that helped also.
It was just insane. And when you write the book of how it should end, and that's just how I felt. I felt that way getting in the elevator that night. Trotz told me all along, I'm getting fired. Like we're sitting there with the Stanley Cup. He's like, we're going to have fun tonight. And you know how Trotz will wink and, we're going to have some fun tonight. And I rode the elevator with him and the general manager between them at the Mandarin Orient from the 7th floor down. They didn't say a word to each other. And Trotz said to me, I'll be at the Bellagio if you want to gamble.
That's funny.
And Jen's got her shoes in her hand, and we're about to walk down the strip, do the walk of shame. It's 4:30 in the morning. It was like Nick Cage and Leaving Las Vegas. She's like, it's been a long night, man. Let's go to bed. So
that's funny.
I am on the conveyor belt at Excalibur, and I called Ed Frankovic, and it had to have been 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, East Coast, right? And Ed's telling me, I had to wake my little one up and tell him we won the cup. And, so like these memories that you have that you take forever. And I just don't think it could get any better. And it certainly wasn't going to get any better with the Leonsis family, for me, for my business, for all the pimping I did, all the bus trips I did that were completely unappreciated, quite frankly, by them. And it was spoken to me by the arrogant son. And I'm just done. I mean, I'm done. And I'm going to write about it and talk about it. But it's amazing how dark it got there very, very quickly for everyone. And that my relationship with Trotz would not allow me to say, watch the lights go out, because that makes me an arrogant dick and it makes me anti-capital and blah, blah, blah. You know what made me anti-capital? Them winning the cup and lying to me that they were going to bring it here and then not bringing it. That above everything, you tell Baltimore you're part of the market, and then you win the Stanley Cup and you don't bring it to town for 3 hours.
Yeah.
On a boat with Under Armour, just bring it into the harbor and let the 1,400 people that have been loving the Caps forever be a part of it for a morning. Have breakfast with the Cup. Literally, we didn't rate that. F Ted Leonsis. I mean, I get angry talking about it. I really, really do, because I put my word on it. I told people when they won the Cup would come here because Leonsis promised me it would happen, and then didn't take a call. So I don't know how I can support that, and I don't know how I can't laugh a little when they lose, but that's too much pain for all of the friends that shared in it. But I'm off the wagon, and I'm happy to tell my side of the story as to why I'm off the wagon, because anybody that knows me knows how much love and blood and radio and audio and bus trips and puck trips and dropping content to talk hockey and make hockey a big deal here, only to win the Cup and be told we're not bringing the Cup to Baltimore. That's bullshit. I mean, that's flat out. So that's where it is. And if anybody sees Ted Leonsis or Zach Leonsis, give him a postcard, ask him how their golf game's doing. Luke is here. He is Luke at WNST.net. He's Baltimore Luke. There, you want to get me ranting? Get me ranting.
You know what? It wasn't even about that, but it was just very much. I remember a few years back that, I mean, the Caps win the Cup, and
Caps meant something here, and they've. I don't know.
I mean, and it's not like, I mean, they're not terrible, but hey,
but they got swept out now, and nobody noticed. Like there was no season for them.
Well,
and now they're going to try to charge $120 for tickets next year. Like, but on and on and on. And Ovechkin looks like your grandfather. Looks like Santa Claus at this point.
I think it's, speaking of in a very general sense, I think it's a great reminder of how fleeting that kind of success. And look, I mean, it's not as though they're going 20-60 the last 3 years either, by any means, but how fleeting that can be when egos get in the way. And you look at what Barry Trotz meant to them. And again, I'm not going to speak about the details like I know it, because I don't, but I just look at it in a very
30 years
in the same way if John Harbaugh had left.
Jerry Jones and
look at Jimmy
Johnson.
You just said it. Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. Yeah. I mean, and look at the Cowboys. I mean, they haven't sniffed a Super Bowl. I mean, Switzer won it in '95 with Jimmy Johnson's team, and they haven't sniffed one ever since then. And you're talking about one of the great franchises and most lucrative, rich franchises in not just American professional sports, but the entire world. And it speaks to that kind of success. Reaching the pinnacle can be so fleeting if you let egos get in the way. And well, it certainly looks like that's what happened in DC with the Caps. But again,
say whatever you want about the
do.
Caps, but you can't beat the Washington Nationals. And you had 3 chances this weekend to beat them. Luke Jones is here. We'll talk some more baseball, some golf, some Phil Mickelson. I'll be getting into all sorts of stuff as we get into Memorial Day here this week. Crab Cake Tour underway. You'll be hearing. Luke, we had just an unbelievable day in Catonsville on Friday. I've spoken a lot about the Crab Cake Tour and what I hope it to be. Go check out the videos. Go hear the conversation about State Fair and Portales and Two Floods birthing State Fair. They're on their 3rd restaurant now. We brought some politicians in to talk about parking and making the community better, and Catonsville becoming a music hub, literally, open air. When you think little Nashville in Baltimore, little Fells Point in the county, Catonsville's about to become that. And we ate some crab cakes and we told some stories, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. Got a commitment from the mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott, on June 11th. Got a commitment from Dutch Rupersburg on the 18th. We're going over to Pizza John's. We're going to have a proper crab cake there. Johnny O, Brandon, Johnny O, Stuart Pittman is joining us at G&M in July. Barry Glassman up in Harford County is joining us, hopefully at Barrett's up in Harford County in July as well. And the tour begins on August 1st in Ocean City, Maryland. And I've got a number 2 pencil commitment from Batman in Ocean City to have a crab cake with me at the Hobbit. So we'll see how it goes. Find me, Nasty at WNST.net, Luke at WNST.net. Together we are at BaltimorePositive.com.